Welcome to you at home and welcome to our studio audience. This is the Evidence series, and in this programme we're looking at suffering. I'm one of your hosts, Gillian Joseph, and I can tell you that Ken Burton's here with his brilliant band. Ken. Excellent. Thank you, Ken. Thank you so much, Ken. And this is Dwight Nelson. Dwight, the topic of suffering. I find it hard to relate to suffering because I think in global terms and world hunger.
Let's poll the audience. How many here have ever suffered? Okay, look, a lot of hands are up. Okay, follow-up question. How many here have suffered deeply? You know, there are degrees in this business of suffering. You know, the old line, I complained about not having any shoes until I met a man who had no feet.
But the big question has to be, why do we suffer? And in fact, do we have to suffer at all?
People are suffering all around us. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. Everyone seems to have pain in their lives. No matter who we are, we all suffer in our own way. We're born from pain and live in pain. What's the point? What can the purpose of our suffering be? Do we learn more when we suffer than when we don't? Some believe there is a God who sees us suffering and feels our pain. But if there was such a God, why would he allow us to suffer?
Britt McCourt, nice to have you on the front table at the cafe tonight. Britt, you have suffered cancer, radiation, chemotherapy. Tell me about that experience you're suffering.
Well, at this moment in time, I almost feel unqualified to talk about it because not only have we heard about the sort of bigger picture of suffering, but in personal terms, even so, once the pain is over, you can't hold on to it. You kind of move on. But if I should draw a sketch around my recent situation,
that would be helpful.
Apart from the pure exhaustion of the treatment and the pain that went with that at certain times, I think the worst part for me was the isolation.
Isolation from the family, from your friends, or?
Isolation in the suffering, because no one else can, although they're all around you, rallying around. I mean, the family, my husband, my two boys were there for me, and my friends, and
still a loneliness.
But you are there, alone. Nobody can partake. And when you're subject to that also, you are unable to communicate exactly what's going on. So they see your distress, they become distressed, and you want to remove some of their distress, but you can't because you're battling with your... So it's like a difficult cycle to kind of deal with.
Out of all this suffering, what has come into your life through your suffering?
Well, certainly living for the moment. That's probably
focusing on
the
the
big
now.
thing. Yes, the present is the valuable. Small things. I just think, well, I have a lot to be thankful for. But you know, it's a path of for me, uncharted territory. You know, you're going...
You've never been over this path before.
And no one else can really say, oh, this is how it's going to be, this is how it's going to be.
And we raise our hands and we say we've suffered, and yet when we hear your story, we realize we've not been over that path you have. Britt, thank you for sharing with us. We want to keep on that path together this evening. Gillian, some music to lift our spirits as we continue through the subject of suffering.
Well, we've all heard the saying that no condition is permanent, and that's what this next song is about. It's called It's Gonna Get Better. It's going to be performed by Leah Oyangasi from London. Leah, tell us what the song's about.
It's a song of encouragement. It's letting us know that regardless of what we're going through, God's with us and it will get better.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Leah.
feeling all alone. Your pain is very real. It seems to be no way out. Just look above and deep inside. You can survive. It's gonna get better. Don't give up now, please. It's gonna get better. Just stick around. Weep and beg and don't for a night. But joy will come. There's hope, so will you stay. It's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. Please don't throw your life away. It's gonna get better, better. You're worth much more than gold, even though you weren't told. Each day is a gift, so live and watch your miracle unfold. You can survive. Things will really soon be much brighter. The sun is gonna shine again. Hang in there and you'll become stronger. You will survive. It's gonna get better. Don't give up now, oh please. It's gonna get better. Just stick around. We've been made for a night. But joy will come. There's hope, so will you stay. It's gonna get better. Please don't throw your life away. Love has brought you thus far, and it will lead you to the light. It's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. Just stick around. We've been waiting but joy will come. There's hope, so will you stay. It's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. Better. It's gonna get better. Please don't throw your life away.
Leah, thank you for that. That was beautiful. Well, maybe through your own journey in life, you've experienced suffering. Maybe you've struggled to come to terms with it and find a meaning. Well, one person who's trying to express the meaning of suffering through their art form is Penny Warden. Penny's in our audience tonight. Penny, welcome. Penny's a fine artist, and through a group of paintings called the Phoenix series, she's explored the meaning of suffering.
The inspiration of these paintings comes from my own background, from a very dysfunctional middle-class family with an abusive father, unfortunately, and it also comes out of my Jewish background, my Jewish blood that comes through my mother's line, and wanting to understand or try and make sense of the Holocaust as a Christian, to understand a loving God and such terrible suffering. As an artist, I want to express that in my way, and I needed to be able to outpour what I feel inside me about suffering into my paintings. I didn't want just to paint pretty pictures as an artist. I wanted to paint something that was very emotional inside me, so that these paintings reflect a huge feeling inside me that splashes onto those canvases, that feeling of anger and questioning and suffering within us. In fact, they're not canvas, these are board. Because the way I paint would probably damage the canvas, because I actually use decorators' tools, which are these great big ones that you use to plaster walls with, and I pick up the oil, just pure oil paint, and I literally smash up the board there to get that feeling of anger in there and movement in there, and then I'll scrape back through with the oil paint, making quite a lot of mess and allowing the accidents to happen. And it's a bit like our lives, really, that the accidents are going to happen and you don't know what's going to happen next. You're going to have to live with that accident or scrape it away and try and make something out of it.
But sometimes scraping back the layers of our suffering can be painful, it can be hurtful. So perhaps we'd rather pretend. We meet people in the street, they ask us how we are, and without a moment's hesitation we say, fine, we're in denial. But what does suffering really mean to you?
Suffering could be about so many different things, health, relationships, family.
Weil die Leute nicht teilen können. Es kann niemand teilen, es möchte niemand von seinem Reichtum abgeben. Es sitzt jeder auf seinen Pfründen. Das ist eigentlich meine Meinung dazu.
Well, I guess that's just kind of people that are just... Well, you mean like in Western culture, or you mean globally? It's kind of like... It means so much more elsewhere, I think, than it does here. I mean, suffering here is kind of like someone who isn't kind of doing the job they want to do in life or something like that, you know, as opposed to starvation.
Warum so viele Armen geben?
Çok şey bulamıyorlar diye.
Ja, weil die keine Arbeitsstelle oder so kriegen, weil das sind ja voll viele Leute. Die kriegen dafür keine Arbeitsstelle, weil das sind voll viele immer.
It's the concept of a hardship which is worth something I could imagine. I don't believe I've ever suffered in anything. And when I think about suffering, it's always the emotional images of sick, starving, people in pain, people having to put up with things that are just inhumane.
This has many faces, and for me is when my son is crying or my parents are ill, or when I have no money. That's not good, but also when people are ill in the world or have no money.
Also ich finde, der erste Grund sind die Jobs. Dass viele Jobs leider nur für intelligentere Leute sind.
You know, I don't think anybody likes to suffer, but I think when you're young, you know, you don't see these things until you get older. I think the older you get, when problems hit, it's hard to bounce back up. It's hard, you know, it is.
Ne bih želio nikom patnju. Teško je kad čovjek pati i nanosi velik unutrašnji nemir, bol, ostavlja duboke rane u čovjeku. I poslije bilo kakve patnje čovjek jednostavno više to nije to što je nekoć bio. Nije lijepo patiti, ne znam, ne bih želio o patnji puno pričati.
To a lot of us, no matter what our personal experience, suffering doesn't seem to have a purpose. We wonder why we have to go through it. But we can grow from the experience. Frank Ross was placed in an orphanage as a child. This is his experience.
My memory of being in the orphanage was I was quite young. I was 3 and wondering where I was, to tell the truth. I didn't know I had parents. Nobody told us how we were born or how we got there or anything like that. I mean, to me, mother and father, they were strange words. They weren't like you hear children now. There was no such word as a mother and a father. I was part of I don't know, an household. I was part of the furniture. I wasn't a human being. I feel I didn't belong to anybody. When I was 10, I was called to this man's office, brothers they were called, and there was a lady. I'd never seen a woman in my life. I'd never seen a lady in my life. And this fella said, "This is your mother." I mean, I didn't know what a mother was. And I was nearly 10 years old. But when I did find out what a father and mother was, it made me more. And I started somehow, I built a prison by myself. And nothing got in. I let out what I wanted, but nothing could get in. I stopped things getting in. I didn't want anything to come in. And they went on for 50 years. Before, I mean, I didn't have to go and rob banks or anything like that. I didn't have to. But it was the only way of feeding this thing inside, this rage, this rage. I paid my men 5 times, 6 times, 7 times of the natural wage in this country. Because I saw them, they had families and I wanted that. And I thought if I give them a bit more money, I could get a bit of that back. But I'd already built that invisible wall around myself. And you hurt so many people with this hate and bitterness, but you can't see the hate and this hurt you're causing. You just can't see it. You don't feel guilty for what all the harm you're doing. It's being fed. The more you seem to do things, this hate gets less. But the next morning, it's twice as worse. If I could go back to that little boy I was, I would want to grab hold of his hands and tell him that he's cared for, he's loved, and he's needed in this world. That everybody in the world is needed and is loved. But once this doubt and fear and this hate and this bitterness gets into your life's finished. Because that's the only life you know. It's good to be free now.
Human suffering, it comes in so many sizes and shapes and experiences.
Absolutely.
And yet you come through suffering and you bring something to the human race out of it.
He says it's good to be free.
Yeah, we have a guest tonight who knows a lot about suffering. Vicki Hawkins, welcome to The Evidence.
Thank you.
You are with Médecins Sans Frontières.
Congratulations.
Well done on the French.
What is the mission of your organization?
Médecins Sans Frontières, or MSF, which is perhaps easier, is a medical humanitarian organization. We work in times of crisis. We're probably best known for our work in conflict situations, but we work in more stable settings as well, with medical crisis. So at the moment, our main activities are in HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis, really the 3 biggest killers aside from
and
conflict
you're in
in the world
Afghanistan as
today.
well, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now,
We're
what would
working
be
in
the major
Afghanistan.
need in Afghanistan right now?
In Afghanistan at the moment, the problem is actually very basic. It's about access to health care. 25 years of conflict in Afghanistan have obviously destroyed whatever infrastructure there was. There's no facilities, there's no trained staff. There's just a lack of infrastructure. So people actually can't access healthcare, and to compound that problem, insecurity as well still ravages the country, and that further compounds access.
So as a liaison officer, you bring in the medical volunteers from around the world, literally.
Yeah, that's right. My job when I'm in the field is to work as a project manager.
Okay.
So I'm not medical myself. I'm responsible for creating this space that enables our medical volunteers to work in a very hands-on way with the population.
When you see suffering, and you've seen it in the Congo and elsewhere in the world, is there a common thread that runs through human suffering?
I think that the common thread is that it's people like you and I. Generally, we're dealing with innocent populations, and particularly when you come to a conflict setting, the primary target, the primary people suffering from the project, from the conflict are the civilian population. It could be any one of us.
So you're there to alleviate suffering, and for every 10 that you can help, What about the 10,000 that you can't?
Yeah, it might seem like a drop in the ocean, and of course that's something that we have to deal with personally. But for an individual patient, if you've walked 3 days to come into an MSF clinic with a dying child in your arms, and you walk out and that child is well, is healthy, that's not a drop in the ocean to that particular person. So we try to take it more down to the individual patient relationship and the benefit, the impact that we have on their lives.
What brings you the greatest joy in the midst of obviously horrendous suffering? What brings you the joy that keeps you going, Vicky?
Seeing that patient walk out of the clinic well. And also, I think just to be with the people, the tremendous optimism and resilience that you find in populations living under very traumatic circumstances. You still generally find a spark of optimism, the opportunity to have a joke, the resilience of the human spirit.
Obviously, we can't all go overseas. We're not all medical personnel. Is there any way we living in the homeland, so to speak, can relieve human suffering?
Apart from making a donation to MSF, one of the things that we really encourage from our volunteers is they're not just there as doctors, they're not just handing out pills, they're there to be proximate to the population that we're working for as well. So we're always our volunteers, they spend time with the patients, they listen to them, they talk to them, they try to understand more about their experience than just the physical symptoms that they might be treating at that point in time.
So how could I do that here?
So listen to people, talk to people, try to see more than perhaps the physical interface that is you're immediately presented with.
Vicky Hawkins, thanks so much for relieving the suffering of this world. Ladies and gentlemen, Vicky Hawkins. Well done. Glad to have you.
Now, this next song is called Crying Inside, and it's going to be performed by Tina Brooks. I know Tina, our daughters used to be in the same school. Tina, how does this song make you feel?
It gives encouragement to those who are on the outside look okay, but inside are really suffering and crying inside. And they don't need to be on their own. They can ask the Lord to help them, and He promises that He will.
Let's hope. Ladies and gentlemen, Tina Brooks.
Just one touch of your hand is all I need. A word so I can understand what you want me to be. Show me just why you came and why you linger near. For what reason you died. Please stop this crying inside. Crying inside. This crying inside of me. I yearn to dwell at your feet, your will to achieve, to hear you speak tender words that attend to my needs.
crying inside, crying inside over me.
Thank you, Tina Brooks, Crying Inside, a song about suffering. Our theme tonight. Listen, if you consider yourself an optimist, I certainly do think of myself that way. You're not going to like our opening quotation, written by someone, a philosopher that has been dubbed the philosopher of pessimism. 19th century German writer Arthur Schopenhauer. His words on the screen. If finally we were to show everyone the terrible sufferings and miseries to which his life is constantly exposed, he would be seized with horror. And if we were to conduct the most confirmed optimist through the hospitals, infirmaries, and surgical operating theaters, through the prisons, torture chambers, and slave barracks, over battlefields and places of execution, if we were to open to him all the dark dwellings in which misery cringes from the glance of cold curiosity, then he too would see that this best of all possible worlds, he will see what it is like. For where else did Dante get the material for hell if not from our real world? End quote. You see, philosopher of pessimism. You can't get much more pessimistic than that. And yet I wonder, 100 years later, if we took the most confirmed optimist that you and I are and exposed us to this world, has anything changed in a century and a half? Huh? Let me put some pictures on the screen for you this evening. I want to put the slums of South America. Violence beyond the pale of law. The most confirmed optimist, what would he say now? Let's put a face of AIDS on the screen. You know that AIDS is now endemic on the entire continent of Africa. Put the next picture on the screen. What would that be? That would be the reality of sex slavery taking place in the world. Boys and girls and women being bartered and sold. Shall we put some children on the screen? Children who are torn by the ravages of terrorism. Look at that face. Let's put some skyscrapers on the screen, because wherever you go in the West and these towering, monolithic monuments to human greed, in the shadows of our skyscrapers, you will find them, the homeless, foraging through garbage, trying to eke out one more meal of survival. What shall we put on the screen? Anxiety? How can you put anxiety and grief and desperation that still grip the heart of Western affluence? I tell you, take the most confirmed optimist. The world doesn't look a whole lot better tonight than it did 100 years ago, does it? Let me read this statistic to you. The American Association of Pediatrics states that at least 1 out of 5 adult women and 1 out of 10 adult men report having been sexually abused in childhood. In 85% to 90% of the reported cases, the abuser is someone the child knows. You want to talk about suffering? Let's talk about the secret wound that too many of us are living with. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the subject tonight. It's a very difficult one. How can we deal with human pain? How can we deal with evil and human suffering? The fact of the matter is that evil and suffering would be difficult enough by themselves. But if you believe, as I happen to believe, that there is a God to inject into the equation, suddenly we've got a huge problem on our hands. We don't have a problem with the worldview of scientific materialism, because that worldview, I remind you, suggests that you and I are here simply by fate's happenstance. There's no destiny that got you here. There's no plan beyond this. You're going to end up a heap of dust in some cemetery city one day, and adios. So what's the problem with pain and suffering? It's just, it's the result of the collision of natural forces with fate. Can't help it. Sorry. So we don't have any problem with that worldview in human suffering. That's just there. But, again, I repeat, if you inject God into the equation, now, wait a minute, isn't He supposed to be loving? Isn't He supposed to be all-powerful? How can you have such a God and the reality that we're living with, pain, evil, and human suffering? That's the question tonight that you and I must wrestle through. Let me put his words on the screen. 3 centuries before Christ, Epicurus, Greek philosopher, here's how he summarized the conundrum. All right? Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? Fair enough, sir. You raised the question. You put us in a box. We have to answer it somehow. Unfortunately, the attempts to answer the question generally create a worse dilemma. Case in point, Mark Twain. You've heard of the American author who came to London and resided. I've seen his house here on a street in downtown London. Mark Twain tells a short story entitled Little Bessie. Prime example. Listen to this one. In this story, precious 3-year-old Bessie was, and I'm quoting Twain now, much given to thinking out the reason of things and trying to make them harmonize with results. You've had children like that in your family, haven't you? And so she started asking her mama one day a flurry of questions about suffering. How did suffering come to be, and why, mama, why? And after her mother had declared that God sent all pain and suffering upon humanity, little Bessie asked, did he give Billy Norris the typhus? Yes, mother said. What for? Well, to discipline him and make him good. But mama, he died, so it couldn't make him good. When her bit befuddled mother quickly retorted that, well, it was actually to discipline Billy's parents. Then little Bessie shot back, well, then it isn't fair, Mama. Why would his life be taken away for their sake when he wasn't doing anything? To which Mama replied that God was punishing his parents for some secret sin of theirs. And little Bessie answered, but he was the one that got punished, Mama. Was that fair? To which Mother replies, certainly, certainly. God does nothing that isn't wise, right, and merciful. You can't understand these things now, little dear. But when you are grown up, you will understand them, and then you will see that they are just and wise. Mama was not going to be bested in that argument. But I'm not very comfortable where Mama ended up. Are you? I mean, that's one way to deal with it. It's just God. But ladies and gentlemen, I need to tell you that I think little Bessie's onto something. That little girl is probing in the right direction. And I must tell you as well, I believe Bessie's mama is dead wrong. I don't believe God causes pain. I don't believe God causes suffering at all. But then if you don't believe that, voila, why do we have it today? Fair question. That's why you and I are here to wrestle through this. If they're not from God, then what's up? As the kids say. What's up with that? Well, there are times you and I have to admit when the magnitude of human suffering, it's too huge for justice to deal with. I don't know if you've been to any of the sites of the Holocaust. I've been to Dachau, and I've been to Auschwitz. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, you stand in that muted, cold chamber where the gas was lowered through the ceiling, and you have to ask yourself, what is the justice? Where is the right being wronged in so brutal a form of human suffering? What do we do with it? And yet I would be lying to you if I didn't say that despite all the terrible tragedies, and you can throw them at me, take me to the Cambodian killing fields if you wish, throw them up, I know of them. But I would be lying to you if I didn't say, in spite of all the mounting pain and inhuman suffering that seems to surround us nearly every waking moment, I believe there is a loving God who is caring for the human race in the midst of this suffering. And you're saying, yeah, right. Hence the dilemma. How are you going to get out of that, Dwight? I mean, loving God, all-powerful being, and yet still this suffering. Well, before we go any further, let me get this out on the table. I don't believe, well, first of all, I'll tell you the no-brainer. I do not have all the answers. You already knew that one. So let me go a little further. I don't believe anybody has all the answers. I don't believe you can have all the answers to anything. Does anybody know who has all the answers to biology? How about psychology? How about physics? How about love? Hey, I found a man who I think is getting pretty close to having all the answers to love. I read this in the paper. It happened near where my mother lives out in California, San Bernardino, California. I read in the paper the 70-plus-year-old gentleman was getting married for the 79th time. Well, I do believe he should probably be the reigning authority on love. However, even he probably has a question or two about the meaning of love. There is no such thing as having all the answers. Ladies and gentlemen, that's precisely the point. So when we're dealing with a subject with the magnitude of human suffering and pain and evil, there ain't going to be nobody that has all the answers. That's the point. Oh, that's just a cop-out, Dwight. You're trying to dodge behind it. No, I'm not. I still believe you're right to press it. We've got to ask, where is God in the midst of all this reality? Let's refocus the question one more time. Let's go to the Scottish philosopher John Hicks. We'll put his words on the screen. I like this little bit of philosophical reasoning. If God is perfectly loving, He must wish to abolish evil. And if He is all-powerful, He must be able to abolish evil. But evil exists. Therefore, God cannot be both omnipotent and perfectly loving. End quote. Now, that little riddle has hung around philosophical circles for years and years. How should we deal with it? We're back to where we started from. Is God all-loving? Well, if He's all-loving, He's obviously not all-powerful because we have suffering. Oh, is God all-powerful? Well, if He's all-powerful, He's obviously not all-loving because we have suffering. Either way, we're doomed. Although I'm going to tell you, I have a feeling that option number one is closest to the truth. Number one being, He's all-loving, but He's not all-powerful. Now, I don't want to push that too far, but let's explore that for a moment. Let's take a look at what it would mean to have a God who is caught in the horns of this conundrum. I've heard people use arguments like this, talking about God's omnipotence. If God's all-powerful, can God create a rock so big that He cannot lift it? So what are you going to say, yes or no? Because if you say yes, He got a rock so big, but He can't lift it, He's not all-powerful. If you say no, well, He's still not all-powerful because He can't make a rock big. So you're caught. It's one of those tricks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me put a line on the screen here and make sure that we get this. Omnipotence isn't what we often, see the stop one here? It isn't what we often think it is. You want to talk about God's omnipotence? Do this one. If God is all-powerful, can God create a triangle with 4 sides? Can He? He's all-powerful. Why can't He? If God is all-powerful, can God create a circle with a square edge? No. Why not? Because you said, Dwight, the very definition means that if it's a triangle, it can only have 3. Once you've got 4 sides, it's impossible. There's no such thing as a 4-sided triangle. There's no such thing as a square-edged circle. You see, but yet that's what we do with God. We push Him into a little corner and we try to make His omnipotence come up with a 4-sided triangle. What's the point of that? You're not proving anything. Let's remain logical. And now that we're on this line of thinking, let me ask you this question. Put it on the screen. Can God create a love that is forced? See that? Can God create a love that is forced? What do you think? Can God force anyone to love Him? Why not? Why not? Simple, Dwight. Because love, by its very definition, cannot be forced. Love has to be spontaneous. If love is forced, it's rape, not love. Is that not true? Yeah. So forced love is an oxymoron, isn't it? It's a 4-sided triangle. You cannot force love. In order for genuine love to be, it must not only give you the right to say yes, it must give you the right to say no. If you can't say no, it's not love. See, now we're introducing a moral dimension into our thinking, because love is a moral dimension. So, well, how is it? Let me keep moving here. Even an omnipotent God cannot force a single creature in His universe to love Him. Can He force him to fear Him? Probably. Can he force him to obey him? I suppose. Can he force her to love him? No. You cannot force somebody to love you. It no longer, by definition, remains love. It becomes a four-sided triangle. Now, let's talk about my laptop computer. I have a love affair with that laptop computer. Let's just say, it's really not true. But let's just say that my laptop computer has been programmed so that whenever I'm feeling a little bit lonely and not loved, I go to my laptop computer and I push a button. And and this is my laptop computer, and when I push the button like this, I feel better already. It says, I love you, Dwight. What a wonderful, wonderful computer. So I get a little bit of love from my computer, go out into the day. I get to feeling kind of left out of conversations, a bit lonely. I come back to my computer at the end of the day and I say, you know, it's been a tough day. I'm wondering how it is with my laptop computer. And I push the button like that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am still loved. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with that laptop computer before you, what would be the difference between that and Karen, my wife, who's here tonight? Karen saying to me, I love you, Dwight. Now, ladies and gentlemen, she says the same words, same syntax, same syllables, same everything, same meaning. But do I experience that in a different way when she says it versus when my laptop says it? Huh? Yeah. Why? Because I know that Karen, contrary to popular opinion, she is not under compulsion and forced to have to say, I love you, Dwight. Although I will tell you this, that every day before I leave the house, she stands me up against the wall and she says, repeat after me, I am a happily married man. So I repeat it, and then I go to work. I feel great. I'm happily married. See? So obviously the point is, look, why do I respect that? And why does it move me when it comes from Karen? Because there are a billion other guys on this planet she could say I love you to, but she doesn't say it to one of them. She only says it to me. And it wells up out of her heart. And I know that it's by free choice that she makes that confession to me. And oh my, that just warms the cockles of my heart. And that's why we've been married almost 30 years. See? That's how it works. That's called love. In order to love, we have to live in a universe that allows us that freedom. And to allow us that freedom is to admit that there is a moral dimension to this universe. A British mathematician named Edwin Abbott wrote a book called Flatland years ago, in which he depicted the citizens of this two-dimensional land as being able to only move forward, backwards, and sideways. Can't go up, can't go down. They can never say, what's up? Because there's no up. See? So they can only go forward, backward, or sideways. The whole plot is based on people living in flatland. Now, this universe, I suppose, would be a flatland if God said, okay, no moral dimension called love. You just, yes, no, yes, no. Yes, no, yes, no. But he introduces another dimension, and suddenly our lives experience a fullness that we have not known. Why? Because now the dimension of moral freedom has been added. Now we have a dimension called love. Where did it come from? That's a very good question. You already know my answer to that question, don't you? I believe the moral dimension of love came from a master designer who into our very DNA gave us the ability to respond, to say yes or to say no. In fact, you know what? The Bible very succinctly describes this master designer with a 3-word sentence. God is love. Love is a moral trait. Therefore, it introduces a moral dimension. This is no flatland earth, but of course, the moment we state that, we're still back. Nobody's gotten out of this conundrum yet. Because if this universe was created to flourish in the moral dimension of love by an all-loving, all-powerful being, then why are pain and suffering a part of our human existence? After accepting that possibility, why do we have pain? Well, I suppose God could have programmed us like a computer. I mean, my little laptop, I suppose it could tell me when my blood sugar is going low. It could be like a burglar alarm, somebody just broke into your house. It could protect me from going onto pornographic websites and getting distracted with that. I suppose it could do anything I programmed it to do. Why couldn't God have programmed the human race, His earth children? All right, just like R2-D2, obey, follow me, come here, go there, Couldn't he have done that? Why, of course he could have. We could have all been R2-D2. But why didn't he want us to be R2-D2? Because R2-D2 has no depth. There's nothing to respond to the genuine warmth of love that comes to you. R2-D2 just says, yes, Master, yes, Master. God could have done it, but he wouldn't. He would have taken the dimension out and it would be a flatland universe tonight. And so, the ability to love, the ability to be moral, we have to be free. We can't be four-sided triangles. We can't be square circles. We have to be free. Free, by the way, not only to be loving, but to be unloving. Free, by the way, not only to be moral, but to be immoral. Free, by the way, not only to do right, but to do wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that freedom that has entered into the equation, the horrible pain and evil and suffering that we experience because people are free to do what they jolly well please. And that's why we're in a mess tonight. Freedom has been abused dreadfully, terribly abused. And you know, it's just like nuclear fission. And soon the whole planet is infected by a freedom gone wild. Shut it down? Oh, you shut it down, then you're back to flatland. Who wants R2-D2 flatland? Forget it. You have to leave it. You have to leave it. A world now we live in so infected by our own wrong choices that even nature itself has been contaminated. Okay, Dwight, so what are you going to do? Come on, get us to the cut to the chase. Give us the answer. What shall we respond? How can I believe in a loving God and have a world like this? There's only one answer. There's only one answer that I know of. And that this loving God, this is the answer. This loving God came in to this world and suffered alongside of us. That's the only answer I have. He came. He came. He came into this world. Became a part of the stream of human suffering, sensed and felt and it lived the evil that we've had to exist and survive in the midst of. That's the only answer I have, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, you know the kind of God you end up with? You end up with a relational God. He's just big on relationships. And that's why he came, because he wanted us to know that we do not suffer alone and that we would not be left forever and ever to be suffering. No, I will become one with you. He's a relational God. Well, that's why we still have suffering, by the way. I suppose he could just snuff it all out just like that. But what if that relationship yet could be one more that I could draw? What if I stopped too soon? One more that I could draw to my forever friendship. That's what I believe. It doesn't answer all the questions about human pain and suffering. I understand that. But I find no small measure of comfort in knowing that I do not suffer alone. That there's someone, a being, who has entered into my suffering. He did it at a place called the cross. You see the picture of the cross and you realize, whoa, there's a story. There's a story there. Who knows life-crushing suffering. Who has suffered alongside of us. And who, because he has, says, hey, boy, one day, girl, one day, I'm going to bring this story to an end, and there will be no more suffering, no more pain, no more tears, no more divorce courts, no more child abuse, no more cemeteries, no more hospitals, no more. I'll have the last word. I find comfort in that when I journey alongside of those who suffer. I want to end by telling you that I work on a university campus. A few years ago, 3 bright young men, part of our university family, went on a snow skiing expedition, flew up to Wisconsin, which is across the lake from us, Michigan, had a great skiing weekend. We're coming home in a private plane. One of them was a pilot, and iced up as it took off. The plane crashed. All 3 boys were killed. 2 funerals on my campus. At the end of the first funeral, I made my way to the front of the church where the heartbroken parents, it was their only child, are weeping over that casket. I mean, what can I say? You want to talk about suffering? That's it. A colleague of mine helped officiate at that funeral, and he was standing beside me. And as we felt the tears in our eyes and the lump that got bigger and bigger, he finally leaned over to me and he whispered, he said, "You know, Dwight, it's no wonder God can't sleep at night." He's absolutely right. He's the God who neither slumbers nor sleeps. How can he sleep? These are his earth children, you and I. He knows what you're going through. He knows how broken your pain right now. He said, "I've been there. I've been where you are, and I am with you now, and one day I will have the last word." And ladies and gentlemen, here's the good news tonight. His last word is 2 words long. Never forget them. 2 words long. God's last word about human suffering, they are these: no more. No more. No more. I believe that. And I wish you would consider believing that too.
Suffering, it's been a deep topic. If you're affected by suffering and you'd like to get in touch with us to discuss it further, please do feel free. You can visit our website, or you can contact us by email, or you can give us a call. We would love to hear from you. Right.
Could it be that in the face of human suffering, we see the face of a God who has suffered for us, who suffers with us, and who one day says of suffering, no more? Think about it, and then join us again next time for more of The Evidence.
Bye for now.